Okay. Board of Water Works Trustees, February 28th meeting. It's about 3:30. We'll start out with our consent agenda. Do I hear a motion?
So,
Whoops.
second.
There we go.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Let's see. Okay, the second item, we have the public comment period. At this time, anybody can speak on anything for 5 minutes or maybe even longer if there's any public or non-public. Don't think we have anybody. We'll go to the action items. Item A, request authorization to issue a purchase order for one tandem axle dump truck.
Yes, this item, as the yellow summary shows, is we're getting towards the end of our vehicle purchases here for 2012, purchasing a one tandem axle dump truck. We always check the state bids, and we did in this instance as well. But we had put together what we thought was a likely price when we estimated $80,000 in our budget. So once we understood the state contract was more than that, we went out and checked a couple of other prices, as shown here through Freightliner, and those prices as well came back higher in the range of where the state contract was. And we ended up discovering that the emission control requirements and upgrades that have been made on those vehicles has pushed the price up higher than what we had anticipated. So the low bid, which is the state bid that we're bringing to the board, is this O'Halloran International Henderson body for a little over $90,000. So that's our recommendation today, is authorize staff to purchase the one tandem axle dump truck at a cost of $90,071.48 through O'Halloran International.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved. Second.
Discussion?
I'm just glad to see that we're piggybacking off existing contracts. It's less of our time for our purchasing agents, and whether it's City of Des Moines or a state contract, I'm pleased to see that they've done that, so thank you.
Yeah, were they researched at this time, approved it? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item B, request authorization to execute Enterprise Assets Management Phase 2 contract. Do I hear a motion? Or Randy, sorry, go ahead and explain.
Well, that's quite all right. We, as our summary sheet states, last June, we received authorization, brought to the board, and received authorization to issue a master service agreement with Huppert for our EAM program, and that we would bring back contracts, agreements, we got the master agreements in place, but bring back for approval each year the next element of that project. Phase 1 was establishing the model for this project, which is the foundation, and we've got that completed, and now we're ready to proceed with Phase 2, which is going to be the first integration of that we're going to undertake, and that's in water production. Part of also what we did in Phase 1 was assess, because our initial thought for Phase 2 was going to be to begin integration in our grounds system, which has no real computerized mapping and computerized records to speak of. But after the Huppert team looked at where we're at and how far along we were with our use of MP2, similar software in the water production area, they came forward with the recommendation that we, for Phase 2, do the integration for our water production records, but also then include our purchasing central stores area. So those are the two elements that ended up switching and bringing forward here in Phase 2. That agreement once we negotiated that with the Huppert team, comes to $863,746.50. That's about $130,000 more in consulting fees than what we had initially anticipated. But largely, that is attributable to the additional training that needs to be done, because purchasing crosses just about all departments. And so we have more people to get involved in the training portion of the project. So that's our recommendation, is to approve the agreement with Huppert and authorize the CEO, general manager, to execute that agreement between Huppert and the Waterworks to approve task order 2, phase 2, in the amount of $863,746.50.
Do I hear a motion?
I'll move.
Second.
Before we get into discussion, I'd like to say something. This went to the planning department, and we looked, committee, and we reviewed it. And one of the comments, the $135,000 additional, really didn't change our budget because it came from our contingency funds. I guess that kind of bothered, I don't want to spend our contingency funds. But Jim and I assumed, it was told to us when we were asking, that it would go to finance, where that's kind of been tracked a little bit better, but it didn't get to finance, and I guess I wish it would have gone to finance, so that, because the planning is doing a little bit different than the finance committee does. Are there any other comments?
Well, I had some questions, and maybe to your point, if it would have gone through finance, I could have answered my questions, but you know, when we're looking at such a large dollar amount, I think we do need to ask some questions, whether it's at a committee meeting or here. But,
Sure.
I had a couple questions. I went back, and thank you, Pat, for helping me find the June 9th minutes. And it looked to me like at that time we had negotiated down from $3 million to the 2.2. And in large part, that was because of a reduction in labor hours and their hourly cost. And then now it looks like we're adding that back in, so it gives an appearance to me a little bit of, it was reduced down, but now it's been added back in. So that's one question that I had. And then secondly, on the memo that we received, it says the total cost remains at $4.1 million. And I'm just trying to get at, I understand that includes Des Moines Waterworks labor, but that looks to me like about a $1.9 million cost then in labor for Des Moines Waterworks. And I just wanted to see if I'm doing my math correctly.
Yeah, the hardware and software costs are also part of that $4.1 million, and that's in the range of $500,000 to $600,000, as I recall. I'm looking out at Jason. Come to the podium.
Yeah, we had that does include the software and the hardware purchase, which is about $700,000.
700.
Roughly.
So the $2.2 million that we approved June 9th did not include that?
No, that's strictly
That was strictly
the consulting contract.
That's strictly the consulting. So, again, if my math is correct, between phase 1 and phase 2, we only have a remaining $378,000 left for completion of the contract.
Phase 2 is the largest portion of the contract. So did we include the projected budget for phase 3, 4, and 5?
Yes, that's the attachment right behind the yellow. Shows the breakdown of additional consulting fees for those phases 3, 4, and 5. So they're roughly in that 350, 360 range for those next 3 phases.
$2.2 million doesn't include the contingency, and these numbers in the budget do include the contingency, so that's the biggest difference there. When we quoted the 2.2 back in June, that did not include the contingency number because we hadn't established the contingency number at that point.
And contingency just says to me things we may not have taken into consideration.
Contingency allows us to take some of the uncertainty of this project, of this scope at the beginning and sort of account for it. So we put the contingency in there to cover things like additional tasks or activities that have to be completed that we didn't find in our first pass of analysis.
Okay, so when we reduced it, and anyone else feel free, maybe I'm the only one that's having trouble with this. When we reduced it from 3 million to 2.2, it was my understanding that we were honing in better on what our true labor costs were, but now it appears that we've added that back in as a contingency.
Well, one of the things that happened during the first phase of the project, the analysis phase that we just completed, is we determined that we were going to migrate the entire materials and purchasing management component into EAM, and that was new scope, essentially. That was a new direction that we had not anticipated doing at first, and that accounts for the majority of the additional $130,000 in consulting. So we went from 2.2. It's a little bit tricky because back in June we didn't include the contingency, and now all our numbers are including the contingency because we have calculated that. So the new number is 2.53, and it would have been 2.4 back in June, including the contingency.
Okay, but let me go back to what this board approved. We approved 2.2 million. I don't remember us approving this contingency, which really brings it closer up to the higher rate, which when we took the action, we thought we'd reduced it down. So,
well, we did, the initial proposal was 3 point something, 1 million, I want to say, was the original proposal from Huppert Stratum.
correct.
And we negotiated that through a reduction in their hourly rate and a reduction in the scope of the project down to 2.2 without contingency. That, what we're putting back in there is about 1,100 hours of additional effort to do the integration and the materials and purchasing management component.
And of the total 4.1 million, how much of that is Des Moines Water Works labor time
It's
cost?
It's right around 1 million. It's kind of, that's about the spot where it's at. We tune that up every single year, but that's still the projection that we're making. It's going to end up being about $1 million in internal labor.
Those are my questions.
Okay. Anybody else, any other comments?
I guess I was thinking about the extra that was being added for training, the 135,000, and just to be clear on it, that 135,000 is being added to accommodate a task that's being put in there to switch over the PeopleSoft system for purchasing into the EAM system, and it's not training for water production, it's training for the entire Des Moines Water Works staff that deals with
That's true.
purchasing.
That's absolutely true. Our purchasing agents are throughout our purchasing clerks, I guess I wouldn't call them the agents because we have a single purchase agent, but our purchasing function occurs throughout the utility. So Randy approves requisitions, I approve requisitions. So anybody who touches any part of the requisition and materials acquisition process is going to have to be trained on the new software, because the way that I went in and approved requisitions in the IT department now is going to happen in a new piece of software. Where before I may not have even touched the EAM software in my business because I don't do asset management through that interface. So now we've added a significant amount of staff that are going to be touching the software right out of the gate on day one. We'll have more people using it for materials management and purchasing than we will asset management initially out of the gate because of the order that we're deploying the software.
And is that a change from being 9th?
It is. It is. Those are all the results of the analysis that we did during the first phase of the project, which started in July and ended, well, it hasn't quite ended yet. We're getting close.
I'm just going to go back to June 9th. I remember making a big deal about if this board could continue to be made aware of things. I think what you've just shared with us is new information that I don't believe we were made aware of. The scope pretty much had changed of the project. And those are the kind of surprises that I think we can work out in a committee meeting and that we would appreciate knowing instead of seeing a contingency added. But I'm just speaking for myself. When you have a major project like this, I think it's always helpful when we know right away if there's a change in the scope, because it
Absolutely.
appears like there has been.
Why didn't we discuss this at finance?
I don't know.
Why, you said it would be on the finance committee.
Yeah, all I did was I made mention of it at the end of the finance and audit meeting, Dave. Our approach was to discuss it at planning. And going back to almost a couple of years ago when we were working this through finance and audit, and then it was pushed to the planning as a planning project and tracking project. So we ended up reviewing with finance and audit the actual budget overall for this project. And this element being the next phase, I didn't view that was a heavily finance item, which I've apparently miscalculated.
135,000, it's finance.
Well, my understanding of the 135, and we didn't discuss it in that form, at the planning committee was a bad assumption on my part that after you reviewed the contract and moving forward with it, that a contingency amount needed to be added because it was determined that what you had planned at that time was going to cost a little bit more. And I didn't understand that it was a decision to change PeopleSoft from the purchasing and PeopleSoft to EAM, and so that's the one part that was new to me. I can understand why you're bringing it forward at this point, because it was not an amount that we had authorized before. But if, our understanding and planning probably would have been drawn out a little better in finance, because I look at the numbers a little differently than I look at the process, and that's why we have two committees. And so that may have been the issue that was there, was that they look at the 135, I look at the process, and we need to complement each other with doing that. So it probably was unfortunate that it wasn't discussed at that point. And I understand that from time to time these things are going to happen. I understand what the 135 is for, and now, today, I understand what the need for it was for, and I'm not against the change that was being made. It's a logical change, and I understand that you have to pay for what you're getting, but the fact that it is an unauthorized number before needs to be brought to us, and I say you are bringing it today, but for a different purpose than what I thought, and obviously for the finance committee. Unfortunate.
Would there be an impact if we held this, and since we're having a finance meeting in March, visited this at the finance meeting in March and then took it up at the March board meeting? Would that cause a problem?
Well, from the standpoint that our team is poised to proceed with the project, that would probably delay completion.
We do have project meetings scheduled to start next month straight away, so we're queued up and ready to execute, so I would be against any further delay in moving forward with phase 2. I guess the reason that we broke the project down into the individual phases and only are authorizing them one step at a time is because there was no authorization for a $4.1 million project
Right.
that ever occurred. That never happened. We set out a projected budget. We discussed it numerous times, and we had what I felt like was general agreement to the scope and cost of the project, but I don't believe that we ever had a number that was authorized other than the initial purchase of software, which occurred in 2009 or 10, and the addition and the execution of phase 1 of the project last year. So I don't know necessarily that I would agree that we're, increasing the amount of a already agreed upon number. I don't think that we did that. We're revising our projection on a 5-year project that had, 1,100 hours, or more than 11,000 hours of effort in it. So I don't necessarily think that it should be characterized as, an unauthorized amount necessarily. We're asking for the authorization for phase 2 right now. And there's a good chance that phase 3, 4, and 5 also will be refined when we negotiate those particular phases. So right now, what you've got is the actual cost for phase 2 and the projected cost for 3, 4, and 5 there. But until we actually negotiate and prepare those contracts, we won't know. I still am maintaining an overall project budget and tracking an overall project budget and updating our projections every single time we do another scope of services. And I still and still today project that the project will come in at the 4.1 million or less.
Well, from my standpoint, I understand a little of what you're saying, but contingency normally is to augment a cost change in what you were doing as a product, and the product has changed. And I'm not against the fact that the product is being changed. It probably makes a lot of sense to do that. I think it's just a surprise to us that the scope was changed. It's not contingency to cover that scope. It's the scope was changed, and it's surprising to us at this point instead of in advance. Like I say, I had advantage of being there at the planning committee, but obviously the finance and audit did not have that opportunity. But my understanding was wrong when I heard it at the planning committee, which is my error.
The one thing I'll mention, when we summarized our phase 1 project for the board, we mentioned that the phasing had changed. We didn't have the dollar figures at that point because that was still being negotiated as part of the agreement. So we didn't have dollars and cents at that point, but we did inform the board that we were proceeding with the recommendation that came out of that phase 1 effort was to proceed with water production. And then I can't remember, honestly, if I emphasized the purchasing piece was also coming right along with it as part of phase 2 or not at that point. But
we probably talked about it more in terms of the PeopleSoft integration itself, because it's certainly the purchasing component is an integration with PeopleSoft. I believe that's what we were emphasizing, because that's the component that got moved up, was the PeopleSoft integration. Initially, we weren't going to do anything with materials and purchasing in phase 1, and when we moved water production up, it made sense to move up the procurement and the purchasing functions as well. So the integration of PeopleSoft has moved to phase 2 from later phase initially. I don't remember where it was initially, phase 3 or 4.
Jason?
Go ahead.
If I could just make a point, again, I'm going to refer back to the June 9th minutes, and I think we gave a lot of trust in this project when we approved it on June 9th. But what was captured in the minutes is it was emphasized that the board wants to be advised of the status of this project on an ongoing basis, ... So I don't feel that that statement is clearly understood, because between our committee meetings that we have and board meetings, by wants to be advised of the status, to me means prior to it coming to us pretty much as a change in what we understood the scope to be. So, I mean, we've had a number of meetings with you between June 9th and now. I would just say, I want to stress again, we really want to be, this is a major undertaking for the utility. We had some issues to begin with regarding communication, and we just want to ensure that those are resolved, and that if anything changes, we would like to be updated. You know, I think what you've described is a pretty significant change. That, to me, even if it's between meetings, to make us aware, would be helpful prior to when it comes to us. That's just my thought.
Sure,
Okay.
yes, absolutely.
Because when Jim and I brought it up, it was just, well, we got a contingency, we just took it from there, and it didn't change our budget, but 135 spent and not spent,
Yeah.
to me, that's a lot of money. And it's a major change in our scope of work.
It is, there is some opportunity. We don't know yet until we really get through this next phase of just what kind of savings might there be from us taking on and doing some amount of the integration for these follow-up pieces.
That's why I was
So
just
there
gonna-
is some opportunity
gonna
to
ask.
reduce that.
These consultants are $100 to $185 an hour, plus plane fare, plus hotel, plus automobile. Can we do it cheaper?
Well, we feel we're actively managing those elements, Dave, and any opportunity we can to do conference calls and minimize trips, we're doing that.
But we spent all that was budgeted, we didn't spend less
no.
than that.
Actually, we didn't. For phase one, we're actually gonna come in under budget. We haven't talked about specific numbers on that yet because it's not finalized yet, but phase one will use no contingency. So there'll be the entire amount that we had set aside for
Good.
contingency that will be reclaimed. And expenses we're looking to come in under as well. I don't remember what the amount was, but they were gonna come in.
And we'll report that.
Under as
Bring
well,
it
so
forward.
as soon as we have the final numbers for phase one, we'll summarize, but we'll certainly be recapturing some of the additional expense that we found in phase two by what we saved in phase one.
I had a question, I guess, kind of on that. I was looking at some information when we had the city, I'll get to you in a second, Randy. And in your budgeting, we had like a hotel for $120 a night. We had 159 nights. A rental car, $80 a day for 137. Do we just give them that money, or do we get their receipts and then get the actual cost?
We get the actuals,
Okay, we don't pay that much,
no.
That's correct.
because $80 for a car a day is.
We track the expenses on a monthly basis. We get
Actual
invoiced.
costs,
We
not
do, we
just.
get invoiced on a monthly basis, and we have the expenses broken out, and we're managing those. The expenses are one area where we feel like we can manage, that's.
Mhm. So we should
There's
have.
a lot of ways.
We
there's a
should
lot
have
of
said,
ways
we
for
should have
us
come
to-
out on the plus side on those things.
We will, we certainly will for phase one, unless it's a highly unusual amount of travel expenses occurs in February. We're gonna come out well ahead on the expenses side for the first phase of the projects.
Well, Dave, that information you just gave us,
Uh-huh.
just to clarify, and I don't know whether you can, maybe Jason can, the $80 for the rental car,
Mhm.
is that per week
That's per day.
or
They're-
per day?
I don't know, I'd have to look at it.
Per trip?
I'll need to verify that, but.
Okay,
We can,
yeah, just check if it's per day, probably isn't right. If it's per week or something, that might make more sense.
The hotel's 120 per day, it's pretty high. Per week, it's not possible.
They've been getting reduced rate at the city reduced rate at the end. So I believe that's about 90 plus tax.
Yeah, I think it might be going up. They raised the rates on our own. We have consultants coming in for similar types of numbers of days, and they notified us that they're raising it.
So we asked them to try and put in a reasonable estimate of expenses,
Okay.
and then we manage and track the actuals. So if we saw something like an $80 a day rate being charged on a rental car, we would question that and challenge
Sure you
that,
would.
and certainly get them redirected. That's how we've been approaching it.
On a couple statements ago, you talked about that basically you've moved the PeopleSoft from a later phase into this now, so when this is all finished, it may not be $135,000 extra. You will probably have savings later on to replace that, and so I think we need to think about the fact that we're still getting what we thought about in the scope. It's just that the scope has been changed from a later phase to phase 2. Is that true or not?
That's true from the standpoint of PeopleSoft integration was not planned until later.
Okay.
PeopleSoft integration that we're going to do in phase 2 has also increased its scope. So we are going to do, because of the transitioning of materials management and purchasing into EAM, that has increased the scope of the project by some amount.
It won't be a one-for-one trade-off,
No.
but it'll
Certainly not.
not be the whole 135,000.
It's my expectation that we'll, if things continue as they have for phase 1, we'll be able to absorb that additional expense without seeing any bottom line increase for the project. In fact, we're only 2 phases in here, we're only 1 phase completed, but I'm still optimistic that we'll beat that $4.1 million projection because of the approach that we're using, funding them 1 phase at a time, managing the expenses, managing the scope, learning what we've learned in the first phase and applying it to the second phase. I expect further opportunities for us to reduce the cost of this project as the project goes along.
Okay, so if we just vote for the original cost minus the 135, you can do it.
Well, that's no easy.
That would be complicated because we'd have to renegotiate the contract with the vendor, so I'd prefer not to do that.
Yeah, but just promising we save it,
Well, I'm not even promising, I'm just hopeful.
No, I know,
that-
nobody's promising.
I'm hopeful that we can.
I hope
We're certainly
too.
not going to exceed the budget that we spell out and that gets approved. That's absolutely a certainty.
I think we've all had a chance to make
Yeah.
sure that you understand when we say we want to be advised of the status of the project. That's not just the money of the project. Randy has an excellent communication tool he uses with all of us that he sends out updates. And, even if it's something on a weekly or every other week basis that you want included in his newsletter, I mean, it'd be great to have, a message from Jason on the EAM project. So I don't want to make more work for you, but I'd like to make it easier on all of us. We really want to know what's going on.
It absolutely wouldn't be any additional work because we're already producing that kind of communication to the management and.
It'd be nice
and,
if we just knew.
Talking about it,
Yeah.
so we can certainly push that further up the chain.
That'd be great.
No problem.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, we'll have a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'm going to vote against this because we've said this before and before and before, and this is a new project, and I want the message clear that this is not going to happen again. Okay? Let's see where we were.
Item C.
Okay, item C, the 2012 Balanced Business Approach Goals.
Yes, I won't go into great detail, but once again, we are bringing forward our yearly goals, utility goals that we established Jason and I took the lead in working with our director team. We've targeted, with the materials that are attached, 15 goals in 4 targeted areas. Our goals are really geared around bringing a balanced approach around, in addition to finance, focusing on the customer, on process improvement, and employee learning and growth. In several previous years, we've had a research and development goal. We've determined that that's largely process improvement. There's what many of those fall into, and so we dropped that as a separate goal and focusing on the process improvement in that area. So the attached Word document on page 2 and 3 really tried to summarize what the 15 goals are built around. In the customer area, and first of all, these goals tied to the strategic plan, and by focusing on these goals and over a 3 to 5 year period, we should be successful in achieving the key result areas that we target in our strategic planning effort. So we start in 2012 for finance, probably in the middle of the page there on the Word document. We're looking at a goal that's targeting adding 1 new total service customer under contract. That in itself will be a stretch because there's not a whole lot of customers out there, wholesale customers, that want to simply sign on and make that agreement. But we have about 3 targets that we are talking to, and we'll see what kind of success we might have this year in getting one of those to sign up. We're looking at adopting a service line maintenance program. We kind of talked about that here at the full board at the last meeting, and with board planning. So we want to bring that forward. And then one of the key areas that I brought forward to the directors was the board directive feeling that we want to see a net zero increase in our operating budget for 2013. So that's one of the targeted goals as well as we look at the budget for 2013. In the customer perspective area, we've got 4 goals targeted there, highlighted in the marketing and outreach initiatives. Do a focus on informing customers of our 2011 service enhancements and being more visible out in the community in various areas, such as a farmer's market. We want to promote the park vision plan. We all know that that is a significant project coming along, and there's lots of information that we need to bring forward with that. And then marketing our ASR, Aquifer Storage and Recovery Technology, is also a key area that can really help us down the road in limiting our future peak loading on our treatment facilities. Then in the process improvement area, we've got 4 areas targeted. Enterprise asset management will continue to be a heavy focus. We also want to focus on our lime residuals. We're fully mining those out at the McMullen facility now, along with our Fluor plant, and we want to assure that we're selling more and more of that through our vendor, through our contractor, Kelderman. So that's a focus for this year. We want to enhance and protect source water quality, and we have multiple water production projects that can do that for us, as well as addressing treatment costs. And then under employee learning and growth, we identified 4 goals as well. Succession planning will continue to be an emphasis, along with workforce diversity. And then lastly, in the workforce area, in both safety and health, will continue to be a focus in what we're bringing forward. So that is a total of 15 goals, and attachment 1 goes into a little more detail of some of the examples that might fall within each of those areas. So I guess with that, I will answer any questions the board might have.
I guess we have a motion first. We have
So
a
moved.
motion. Second. Okay, discussion.
We,
Very aggressive.
Yeah.
we did look at this at the planning
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
committee meeting as well.
One thing, that full service agreement, I think we need to explain to some of our wholesale customers the advantages. You don't have to buy purchase capacity, isn't that right?
That's potentially one of the
And,
benefits, yes.
A lot of stuff is taken off of people's back. There's some real strong points for us doing that for our customers. Any comments?
I agree, it's
Okay,
ambitious. I like this format because it gives us all a way to track it. It's clear for the uninitiated to follow, and I appreciate that.
You know, and this year, it's not just fluff, it's real
Yeah, I agree.
substance, it's substance there. I think you did a good job on that.
Thank you.
You get 95% of it done?
That's a stretch, no question.
No, I think that was real good. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 100%. Okay, we'll go to item D. We have a public hearing. So, let's see. That would be item D, filter building rehabilitation phase 2. We'll open the public hearing and ask for comments from the public.
We've had no oral or written comments.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing.
And the finding?
Let's see. Did you have any findings?
Well, we had a finding that there's no facility of its kind available for rent or sharing, certainly.
Okay. And
Dave, I'll move the adoption
Okay.
of the form of the contract plan specifications and estimated cost.
thank you, Sue.
Second?
Okay, discussion? No discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, analysis of bids.
Okay, Randy?
Okay, this project has been a complicated one, certainly a challenge because it's an expensive project. We brought it forward and bid it in November and brought forward, it was a $3+ million low bid at that point. And that compared with about 2.1 million was kind of our target where we could have stretched it. And as the design team went back and re-looked at this project, about the way we could bring it forward into our 2.1 budget is to address the structural elements. So that's what this bid is doing, the structural elements being the roof system and primarily the roof system. And that's both precast roof as well as the structural steel that supports that roof. So we're addressing all of those features. And then we added a bunch of alternative bids because we weren't certain just what the bids might come in. And any ability we had to add back in certain elements to get up to something close to 2.1, we wanted that ability. And so the low bid was submitted by a company called Brocon Services LLC out of Johnston. They bid $1.9 million. They haven't done work for us in the past, but they have done work successfully in the area, which we checked for their references. And so we're bringing forward this recommendation to award it to Brocon. That will replace the precast panels in our original 1945 section of the building. Will address any lead paint that's part of that. We'll repair the precast panels in the 1958 portion of the filter building. It will totally replace the roof system over that section. We're going to add in the clear story in the 1945 edition, so we'll address that masonry. So we're not working on top of new roof in the future. And then we've got door replacements and cleaning of interior masonry walls being proposed. So with this contract, a little over 2.1 million, We'll address the structural elements of that building, and then that'll leave us with something approaching maybe a $700,000 worth of effort on masonry on the outside for next year, which we will bring forward as a separate contract, separate project. So that's our recommendation here today, is to award this contract to Brocon with the alternates that I've just mentioned in the amount of $2,156,400, and authorize the chairperson and CEO general manager to execute the contract.
And do I hear a motion?
Move.
Second.
Discussion? This has been a long project, but I think it's coming out much better than originally.
Well, I wanted to
Staff's done
compliment Vern Rash. When I started reading through this, I don't remember reading a project from Vern that he had outlined before, but I mean, the detail that we were given regarding this company that we have not used before. And I especially appreciated some of the detail in the Iowa Army National Guard when they're talking about very intricate and important projects. And it just sounded like they were used to dealing with, I don't want to say historical, but, you know,
But some sensitive
structures.
structures.
Yeah.
Different
So
projects.
I want to compliment Vern for the level of detail provided. Thank you.
It's been a long, drawn out, but it's going to be worth it. This will be good. Okay, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item F, we have a public hearing, 2012, whoops, wait.
Yes.
Item E, 2012 Water System Improvements, Contract 1. We'll open a public hearing.
And we've received no oral or written comments.
We'll close the public hearing. Randy, if you want to.
Also, here we've had a finding of there's no facility of its kind for rent or sharing.
Okay.
Dave, I'll move
That
the adoption
motion.
of the form of the contract plan, specifications, and estimated cost.
Second.
Motion, or all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry.
Okay.
Randy?
We received 4 bids on this project. They're still very competitive bids in this line of work. We had an estimate of around $875,000, and 3 of the 4 bidders were below that, with the low bid submitted by Holbrook Construction. Holbrook has done work for us very successfully in the past, and so we're ready to recommend to the board that we award this 2012 Water System Improvements Contract 1 to Holbrook Construction, Inc. in the amount of $666,833.25, and authorize the CEO and general manager to execute the contract.
Your motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Or discussion? Sorry. Any discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, the item, sorry. We had one more public.
Item
hearing.
F.
Maybe I can get this one right. Item F, 2012,
Pre-sedimentation.
Resedimentation Basin number 2. I'm not doing well today. Rechaining. Do we have, we'll open the public hearing.
And we've also had no oral or written comments on this as
Okay,
well.
we'll close the public hearing. Randy?
Also, there's been a finding that there's no facility of its kind for rent or sharing.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Dave, I move the adoption of the form of the contract plans and specification and the estimated cost.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Comments? Randy?
I think we vote.
Pardon me?
I think we vote on
Okay.
it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, we had on this bid as well 4 bidders. Waldinger Corporation was the low bidder. This is a contract that we bid historically, so there's bidders are pretty well familiar with the scope of work. We're dealing with a heavy chain that's involved with this retaining Waldinger, low bidder, in the amount of $69,245. And that's our recommendation, is to award this contract to Waldinger Corporation in that amount and authorize the chairperson and CEO, general manager to execute the contract.
Do I hear a motion?
Move.
Second. Discussion?
You better not get used to always coming in under estimate.
Yeah.
I think that time is gonna change.
Yes.
Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Item G, it's simple. Request authorization to solicit bids for the 2012 Water System Improvements Contract 2 and establish the date of the public hearing as the date of April 2012 board meeting. I hear a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah, these are a couple of streets, as the map shows, also on the south side. One section on Kenyon Avenue and another section on Army Post Road. We're going to address in this contract.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item H, acceptance of the 2011 Water System Improvements Contract 1. I hear a motion? Or Randy, you explain it, I guess.
Well, yeah, this is our bringing forward to accept this contract. This was Drake Construction completed this work. Initially, the amount was a little over $456,000, and so by the time we had a deduct, one change order that was negotiated, a deduct of a little about $4,300, and unit quantities always change on these things. So with this one, we ended up with a final contract amount just a little over the estimated amount, but just under $460,000. This work was completed successfully, and we're bringing it forward to accept this contract 1, accepted or completed by Drake Construction LC in the amount of $459,861.38.
Okay. And do I hear a motion on this?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, I guess we'll have our committee reports. Jim, do you want to have anything on the planning committee?
Well, the items that we talked about earlier tonight on this agenda were discussed at the planning meeting, as you can recall, from the Enterprise Asset Management Program and the business approach. The balanced business approach was discussed. We did, in addition to that, discuss the architecture planning, and it was basically announced that the Sasaki and Associates with RDG and design and applied ecological services was going to be awarded the contract for doing this. And so the discussion was with staff as to a meeting that they were going to have and talk about where we go from here. And they were going to have that meeting later that week. And their discussion was about how we could approach this project with the amount of money that we had budgeted, $50,000 for the year, and who was going to be targeted for the corporate and team members to continue carrying it forth, and how to go about validating the concept before we get started. We know that this is a multi-year project, and we know that there is going to be a need for philanthropic funding to carry it forward. And so it's getting started on the basis with a discussion of how to go forward in 2012 and then from that point forward. And so we assume that those discussions have been started and taking place.
Any discussion or questions of Jim? The discussions are taking place. I'd expect you'll hear something in a few weeks, I'm hoping. And Sue, finance?
Finance, I want to thank all of our committee members, or all of our board members. We just have a lot of attendance at finance meetings. We do, and, but just to kind of review some of the highlights, we did go over this revised rate structure, and Peggy gave an excellent presentation. Reminded us of the reason that we would even change the rate structure in the first place, and that would be that we would want to make sure that it was, you know, good for the customer, good for the utility, would be able to help us forecast out a little bit better. And it became obvious that the rate change that we were looking at would not accomplish those objectives. So we're still back at the drawing board, if you will, and looking at any kind of a rate structure. And we did encourage communication, as it's stated here with Central Iowa Drinking Water, to get their input as well, to see if there are some other structures that they would like for us to consider. We reviewed some cost savings. The one in particular, and kudos goes to Amy and her staff, an annual savings we've determined of $71,000 in the automated pre-termination courtesy calls. And Amy shared with us that so many of the customers are pleased to get these calls. And I mean, it's resulted in a significant of the $600,000, $71,000 has come by not sending these guys out to shut off the water, and everything that results, as you know, comes from that. The other part under the savings we discussed was the consumption alerts. And Randy, I wanted to thank you for sending out the YouTube video about the destruction of the water tower. I thought that was interesting. But when I saw that, I would love if we could do some kind of a video on how to set your consumption alerts. Because my husband received one the other day, and sure enough went downstairs and a toilet in the basement was running, and no one's ever in our basement. So we're living proof that that they work, and it was very positive. So again, nice job to our IT staff and to customer relations on that. But I would love to make a video available of how you do it, because I didn't set it, but he said it, and it's very simple. I mean, how you get this alert and you start saving money. Amy did say that they've started to receive calls, and then we received positive calls. The health statistics was presented. At the time we had the meeting, we decided to cancel the finance meeting for March. We now have that back on. You may note,
March 13th.
For March 13th. You may note that there was a previous item on the HR discussion. We would like to, like we've done with all of our issues that are going to require any kind of board action, run this through a committee, ask the questions that we need to ask, and so we did take that off what was the original agenda for this meeting, and we've asked for that to come to finance. So if you're confused as to whether or not we're having a finance meeting, we are. And that will be the primary issue we'll be discussing. So, and if Jason wants to bring anything. That's all I have.
Any other questions for Sue? Or okay. Graham, how about the Botanical
I have nothing to report. Our meetings skipped this month, so we actually meet this week, so we haven't met since this board met last.
Were they going to present something to us so we could see?
They would like
the
to,
cool stuff
and I
they
was
got
thinking
coming?
it would probably be, I don't think it'll be April, probably the May meeting.
Okay.
But I'll send something on to you. We wanted to make sure that the plan had been approved, so when she comes, she can present the final plan to us.
It sounds like they're really doing some
I think it's gonna be great.
cool
And
things.
as I say, they're raising money. So
And it's all private money. It's
all
not
private money. So, but I'll know more this week. We meet on Thursday this week, and then I'll send something to you, but I would bet on the May meeting would be
Great.
probably, if
That'd
it
be
works out
good.
for us, would make sense for them.
Yeah.
Are they going to present it to the city council then, probably too?
Yeah, oh yeah,
Wonderful.
absolutely.
Okay.
I don't know whether it'll be before or after ours.
Great. Randy?
Yes, a few things I'd like to review. On the water quality front, we're in that time of year when ammonia levels tend to rise in the rivers. And we've been fortunate so far this winter that we haven't seen as high a spike, but we are seeing a little bit of an increasing trend on the raccoon, which ammonia in the water tends to neutralize and require more disinfection, more chlorine. And our water production staff stays on top of that. And it was just today that we're seeing more of a increasing trend where we thought that might, with low ice cover this winter, that might be a lower level than what we've seen in the past. And that still may prove out, but we're not quite out of the woods yet. Back in 2008, that ran through from late February through a good share of the month of March. There was elevated levels of ammonia in the river. And then we received an updated water supply operating permit from DNR. And I usually don't talk about these things, but just a couple of minutes worth. It's a 20-page permit that outlines all the requirements that we need to test for and submit in compliance with our permit. And our water production team does a great job in tracking these kinds of things to ensure that we're always in compliance. One of the things that caused this new updated permit is a change in the disinfection byproducts rule by EPA. And so that's no doubt causing new operating permits for any utility that operates a treatment plant. So there's several pages of requirements dealing with the disinfection byproducts. We have 5 source entry point in our system, 3 treatment plants and our 2 ASR wells, aquifer storage and recovery wells, are all treated as source entry points, and that kicks in a set of testing requirements. And these tests, these samples vary in frequency, whether they're monthly, yearly, every 3 years. We have some in the radium category, 1 sample every 9 years. And so they've got a sampling period. 2018 is when we need to sample that at McMullen plant. And chances are there may well be a new permit issued between now and that time, but these are all things that our water production folks log in and track to ensure that we grab the sample at that point in time. Because failure to collect a sample can result in a permit violation. And then we do have monthly reporting that's required for any sample and analyses that we take. In addition to the pumping volume of water that we're pumping, we do have chlorine, turbidity, pH, those type of parameters that we do report to DNR each year. But that's 20 pages of fair amount of detail that we have to track and to ensure the quality of the water we're delivering to our customers. So,
And so all these little water plants around the state are going to have all this dumped on them too?
they have those similar requirements. Depends whether they're a groundwater supply or a river supply. That's a couple different, 2 different rules kick in on that. But yes, they would have something similar. Our FEMA materials for our appeal, the second appeal went out almost 2 weeks ago, or the 17th. So yeah, close to 2 weeks ago. So they went to Homeland Security here in the state, and they had 60 days to put their material and response together and to forward it on to FEMA. They've been very supportive of our position, and I don't anticipate they're going to come back with anything much different than what they did the first time. But I'll make reference to the National AWWA, American Water Works Association Journal. We're going to have an article in the July issue. Dan Klopfer from our engineering staff, along with a consultant we use for our anode retrofit program, put a journal article together, submitted it, an abstract, and that was accepted, and that'll get published. We got word this week or last. That'll be in the July issue. So kind of kudos to Dan and for his efforts on that. And then we received a positive compliment from a customer, and I sent that to the board. And I thought it'd be worthwhile just to mention is it started with a call to our dispatch area on a Sunday. And we operate our dispatch area on a 24/7 basis, 365 days a year. We had a customer that had a leaking meter and contacted our dispatch area. It was very complimentary of our dispatcher who handled that, who called an on-call service worker who was out within an hour, if not a half hour, solved the problem very quickly for this customer, and they were very pleased with that result and ended up sending a thank you note to the utility. And I believe Dave responded to that person. And then just Friday, another customer who had vehicle problems on Army Post Road last Friday wrote to say thanks. Her car was stuck in some ice on Army Post Road. She apparently skidded off the road, and two of our workers who happened to be driving by stopped and freed her car up and positioned our vehicle so that she could safely get her car out of that stuck ice. And again, she was very complimentary with the friendliness and help and assistance that our two field staff provided her. So she just sent that email on Friday. So
I think that's one thing. When Jim got on here, he mentioned how good our staff was to him when they came out to the house before he was on the board. And 100%, I've never heard anything bad about our staff. Out in the field, people just are snowed.
Our folks take pride in their work, and they do outstanding work.
Randy, when you get a call like that, and they're complimentary on a Sunday of a customer service person, are you able to find out who it was they talked to so that you can visit with them?
Yes,
Great.
and that's been done.
Great.
In that instance, we're
Great.
we're tracking this down to just see who that was, who
Perfect.
provided the assistance, so we can pass that appreciation on to those workers.
I ran into some people up in our neighborhood, and it happened, they didn't know who it was. They didn't know me, and they didn't know Jack Hatch or Sonia. It just happened to be their meter, and I called Randy, and the guy even said something about, I said, this is really great, and he said, oh, I just love my job. This was one of our employees. And Randy said he would, let them know.
That's great.
Then lastly, we hosted the Drinking Water Commission meeting here in January, and probably the biggest decision or business they had to take care of was elect a new chair. And John McCune, who chairs the Urbandale Water Board, was elected chair of that group for the next 2 years. And so, and then the minutes from October commission meeting is attached here with this packet. So I'll pass out the draft committee agendas for March. And for planning, we've need to retain a consultant to assist with upgrades to our stormwater pump station and collection system within the Florida plant. And so we have a proposal that we'll want to bring back with a recommendation to retain a consultant to assist us with that work. And then McMullen treatment plant alternative water supply. We've been talking with some landowners, and I think we've reported at planning that there's an opportunity that's presented itself for us that we'll discuss with planning. That could bring some additional source water for the McMullen plant. And then a park vision plan update and FEMA update we've got listed.
Would you be at a place yet you could bring us up to date on Saylorville, how it's done? Is it about a year now?
In May, it will be. So we'll have a little more information, and that's our plan, Dave, to give you kind of that capsule of what we're seeing through May.
Okay.
And then finance and audit, as Sue mentioned, is back on for March 13th, 3:30. And the Waterworks City Des Moines HR Subcommittee Next Steps is the topic for that meeting. So that's all I have.
All right. Anybody else have a comment?
One.
I think everybody's got an A except me. I got a D for this meeting. So,
Good
meeting's
plan.
closed.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Sue.